So anything for you in a heartbeat. Second, you mentioned the Maya Angelou Quarter. So yes, that has been one of my personal passions for going on 6 years now. Very happy to see that making its way to a lot of hands of children, hopefully sooner rather than later. And then, yes, so I've been thrilled with what's happening with Unicorn Hunters. I look forward to kind of the next round of shows. And I think it just is a great kind of, intersection between kind of both our careers and certainly what we have done in the past in terms of empowering women. And certainly you mentioned my 3 favorite words, which is women, money, and power. So let's go.
And I love that. And you mentioned the quarter, and you are in Paris now, but you just spent your quarter in someone else. So will you show us at least an
I did. I had one of the quarters with me, and I gave it to a very, very dear friend who deserved it. But I do want to share it. It has obviously been in the news. It's been, I think this article's from the New York Times. But I think what's important for this quarter, it's not just about a quarter. It is about Maya Angelou, and it is about the 20 women who will be represented on these quarters for the next 4 years. And so this piece of legislation is about these women I call buried treasure, but it's also about the journey that it takes to get women like this highlighted as part of our history. So, when you think about, the work that I started as Treasury of the United States to put the portrait of a woman on our Federal Reserve notes for the first time in our nation's history, that was kind of my first awakening. But to know that here I am, I started in the Treasury Transition Team in 2008. So here I am in 2022, that many years later, 14 years later, knowing that, these quarters are out there, which is so exciting, but also knowing that these journeys are difficult and there's just so much more work to be done. And you mentioned the statue exhibit. And so that was, also something very new that just happened. And so I literally just came from DC, so just a few days ago, where this fabulous organization called the Lyda Hill Philanthropies was inspired by my work. Hope you can see that. Inspired by my work to honor women, and they funded this exhibit with the Smithsonian called If Then, and it's now out there at the Smithsonian Industries and Commerce Museum outdoors, where you can see 120 statues of real women who are today working in the STEM fields. These are living women that serve as what I call inspirations for aspirations. So these are women who hopefully other people, boys and girls, can look to these women today and women in the past and allow them to think about their own future and their own full potential. So this is all coming together now in a very meaningful and I think timely way, especially coming out of the pandemic, where we really started to question kind of what we value, who we value, and how it should be valued. And so thinking about, again, our history as a way to inspire the future, it's been a long journey for me, but it's been worth it. Every single minute has been worth it, and much more to come.
Rosie, and you are one big reference for many women, not only because you talk about equality, but you are actually driving with actions, not word, which is what really matters, because we have heard so much about the narrative of how important it is to give women the opportunity, but you are actually doing a lot of work on that. But as you know, women has been left behind in terms of investment. Only 2% of the venture capitalist money goes to female founders. And you are a woman, you are an expert on money. We always joke that you made more money than Carlos Slim, which is quite a lot. And it will be important for us to discuss one topic that I think it's very relevant is, what is your opinion on why women are raising so little of the venture capitalist money, and how we can change this reality? Not only talk about it, but actually change it.
Yeah. So when you mentioned women, money, and power, so basically, when I was in the administration, in addition to what I was trying to do with redesigning our nation's currency, access to capital was a big theme. And it wasn't just access to capital in general, it was access to capital for those who've been disenfranchised, specifically at that time from the financial crisis. And so when a lot of people lost their homes and a lot of people kind of had to rethink their careers, at the height of the financial crisis, that was certainly something that Treasury took the lead on in terms of thinking about ways to jumpstart the economy again. And so, first, let me just start by saying, so anytime you have folks who are disenfranchised, they're usually the hardest hit when something happens, right? And so it's kind of these concentric circles, and those who are on the fringes are usually the first to go or the least priority. And so, when you see women who've been marginalized for too long, not just in our history, but in terms of access to capital. And of course, they were disproportionately impacted, not just during the crisis, but you also saw that in the most recent pandemic, right? Whether it was people who lost their childcare, people who lost their jobs, people who couldn't balance what it meant to have kids being homeschooled and having to juggle their jobs. And so again, women have always been disproportionately disenfranchised, but anytime there's kind of this tipping point, whether it is the crisis, whether it is the pandemic, et cetera, they feel it even more so. And so access to capital in general has always been a big struggle. And look, anytime you're talking about money and power, that's, I always say it's not a glass ceiling, it's a glass wall, right? So to be able to enter that arena in the first place is so difficult because you are competing against people who perhaps haven't had the same types of challenges of what it takes to even be at the table. So, VC is certainly one of those areas where it's been kind of this desert for women in general about accessing that. And so, I want to go back to how even I think about the value of something like a Unicorn Hunters show in the first place. So lo and behold, when I was in Treasury in 2011, we had this Access to Capital conference, and it was specifically to address the lack of IPOs from the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, et cetera. And so this Access to Capital conference literally created this task force, and this task force is the group that ultimately made the recommendations to Congress for what became our Jumpstart Our Business Startups Act of 2012. That was the legislation, the Jobs Act of 2012, that eventually would include the provisions that included crowdfunding, that even allow for a show like Unicorn Hunters to even exist. So it's kind of fun to think that something that I worked on in 2011 would actually come to fruition when we first started Unicorn Hunters in 2021, 10 years later. So to see it kind of manifest its way so that it literally provides resources that otherwise would not be available through traditional channels, would it not have been for these crowdfunding provisions, is really exciting. And so when you think about that being a private enterprise, if you will, but using a government enabled resource is thrilling. And the fact that Unicorn Hunters provides what I call, the democratization of capital, but the ability to have these founders who, and obviously you and I know we've been champions of a lot of these female founders from the get-go, and still trying very hard to again, give these female founders the opportunities that probably they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. To see it all come to fruition, and obviously this was, you, Silvina, and Alex and Mo's vision from way back when, to see it come to fruition the way that it has, and that we're about to, embark on this new journey of this new round of companies is a dream come true for you all, but it's also a dream come true for us, who've been working on this as you have for decades. So the fact that it has never been a level playing field already with women, but here you are in the private sector trying to make something happen in a way that's never been done before. Kudos to you, really. Kudos to everyone who's worked so hard to make this.
Kudos to you and to President Obama and everyone that works for the Jobs Act, Rosie. This was a game changer for the life of many, many entrepreneurs, especially diverse entrepreneurs, the ones that usually do not fit on the criteria that venture capitalists have for their investment, that they have, as we've seen in the show, amazing founders of all ages, like Silver Economy, women founders, founders from LGTB community, founders from different parts of the world that has the companies and can now partner with the public, with the audience, who can become their shareholders and co-build with them, as we said once, and it was actually mentioned can become potentially the next Apple, and they can see the next Apple from the ground up. So this is your doing, and we are thrilled, and I'm extremely honored to have the opportunity to co-build with you this incredible project. And Rosie, one thing that we also see when we see women, because we are talking about women today, is that we don't come across as assertive, as aggressive, or as optimistic as usually men do when we are pitching investors. And this perhaps have an impact on the perception of the value of the companies that we are creating or represent. What do you think that is the broken link on why women are wired in a way in which embracing power, success, and money is frowned upon by the society?
So, I talk about this all the time in terms of what I consider to be kind of, a confidence deficit. And, I think this concept of a confidence deficit specifically for women, and actually starting out as young girls, is very, very real. The science is there. We all know, for example, when a young girl first starts school, right? Whether it's the mean girls, whether it's the boys who pick on them, whether it's the teachers who don't call on them, there have been studies that show that, young girls start to question their intellectual abilities, between the ages of 5 and 7. Kind of surprising, or when a young girl first takes math or algebra, that's usually one of the biggest determinants on whether or not they're going to continue on into the math and sciences. Or when a young woman first starts college, for many young women, that's really the first time where they feel kind of this physical vulnerability that perhaps they've never felt before. And so those confidence deficits are compounded over time. And so that, I really strongly believe that we come into this adult world at a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of again, look, everyone has challenges. Everyone has, childhood issues at some point in their lives. But I think specifically for young girls and then for women as college students, I think there are certainly some milestones that I think certainly, if not addressed, are much harder to kind of bring into your work life if not addressed. And again, that feeling of whether you call it intimidation, whether you call it, that you're not being listened to, etc. Those are real feelings, and I think there are other kind of levels that come into play when you're into the, when you do enter the workforce. Look, it's all coming out now in terms of you hear all these stories about a woman at a conference room in a meeting, and she says something and no one hears her, and then someone else, male might say it, and then all of a sudden it's, a great idea. I mean, that's, that seems to happen more than we like to admit, or if you talk to your sister or your wife or etc., and you find out that maybe, again, they don't feel as valued in the workplace as they'd like to feel. Or, again, there's just too many times. I love this one. How many times have you seen this where you hear some bosses won't even meet with their female colleagues one-on-one? And so yet they'll meet with their male colleagues one-on-one. And so when you don't have access to that kind of that confidential, sensitive one-on-one time, you're at a disadvantage. And so I think it's a culmination of all of that. I think when and then when you have this, potential billion-dollar idea, and that is threatening to a lot of people, and then you want to walk in and you have this business plan, and again, perhaps you're not taken as seriously as you want to be taken. All that makes a difference in your pitch. All that kind of, again, kind of that aggregated, feeling of perhaps that you're not good enough. When we feel that a little more often, I think, than we want to admit. No matter how confident you are, again, I think we all could use a little bit more of an open door where it doesn't exist. And I think now it's coming to light, a lot of these issues that are happening in the workplace, a lot of these issues that we have to take on at home. And hopefully, again, this is a new day. I think if anything good that's come from the pandemic, it's this ability to reset the button, press the reset button, and perhaps start over and thinking about how our workplace and how we as colleagues can actually start working in a different light.
Yes, and I like what you mentioned about the workplace, but it also happens with entrepreneurs. The moment they are pitching, they just pitch for survival. They pitch very humbly. They pitch like even, apologetically, and as if they were taking someone's money away. As women, we feel uncomfortable handling and asking for big money. But on the other hand, we also have very few women who are active investors. And I feel it's a little bit of culture, a little bit of education, a little bit of risk aversion. But I would love to have your ideas on, first, what do you think? But second, how we can change that, and why what we are doing at Unicorn Hunters and with Unicorn, it's playing a role in changing the reality, not only the narrative, as we always said, of enabling people that perhaps in the past their money was not valuable to actually have the opportunity to co-invest and participate in the building of companies that can become extremely valuable in the future.
No, I mean, I certainly think there is this amazing trend happening of a lot of women in leadership positions who are now starting their own funds specifically to invest in women. You certainly have seen it on the institutional level, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. They all have these dedicated funds, 10,000 women, et cetera, specifically set up to invest in women-owned businesses or small businesses, et cetera. But you also have individuals, whether it is Melinda Gates, whether it is Penny Pritzker, they have their own kind of set of funds set aside specifically to invest in female founders, female entrepreneurs. So, that I think people are understanding that given, a level playing field, if you want to call it level, but at least you're trying to level some playing field by having these resources available. Time will tell, but there's no way that it was going to sustain itself the way it was before, where there was so little directed towards women-owned businesses. And I know that there's a lot of other efforts to make sure that other underrepresented communities are also part of the picture, which, believe me, I support 1,000%. Look, I'm Latina. When it comes to Latinas or any women of color, we're hardly a rounding error, right? So when you talk about 2% going to women, think about how much less goes to women of color.
0.4%, exactly.
It's
like
embarrassing.
Non-existent.
It's embarrassing. You can't even, it's hardly even a conversation, really. But that's why, when people talk about why do you focus on women specifically, I focus on women because it's 51% of the population. And when you get at a majority of the population, that means it's an equity issue for all of us, because we all have a mother, a daughter, a sister, a niece, a granddaughter. Someone we know along the way has experienced this, has experienced that, confidence deficit, has experienced the being turned down for a business loan, being turned down as an entrepreneur, being turned down for any ask. Actually, we all know someone where that's happened to them. And so when you know that there's you have a vested interest in the outcome, people tend to react to things differently. They want to see those changes because they can't bear to think that if things don't change, it is going to be their daughter, it is going to be their wife, it is going to be their sister, etc., who isn't going to have a fair chance at reaching their full potential. And it's amazing, again, when not that all those other constituencies are important. Of course they are. I live it every day when I see the disenfranchised be even more disenfranchised. So, but again, when I think about it from a 51% perspective, then we all need to fix, we all need to right the wrong. And it can't sustain itself like this. It just can't.
The great paradox is that is half the sky or half the universe, as you name it. The women today are achieving highest number of educational degrees, advanced masters.
Absolutely, they're matriculating more. They're a high number of PhDs. Yes, the stats are all there.
Companies run by women present better ROI and profit. So please explain me how, if we have
no,
the
that's
numbers,
right. But it's also absolutely. But it's also the other piece of it. So when you talk about higher education, higher enrollment rates, etc., the saddest part about that is where the stats also go when you think about women in kind of the economic the indicators of social, political, and economic power. So whether it's women on corporate boards, women in the C-suite, women in Congress, mayors, governors, they all seem to flatline at this 20%, 20 something percent. And it's been like that for decades, right? So it's not just about, it's not just about, there are definitely economic implications here, but it's, again, the political and social implications of what it means that your daughter or you or whoever only has a 20% shot at achieving that dream if they want to go on to be, again, a senator, a member of Congress, a governor, a mayor, a tenured professor, an equity law partner. The numbers are staggering that they all happen to hover in that 20%. And that hasn't changed. So this isn't just, it is absolutely about women, money, and power, but there's more to it than that. And why I think it's such a valuable lesson is because when you think about this next generation of leadership, right? So the millennials and post-millennials, pretty much anyone who was born in the mid-90s and later, they think so differently than my generation, right? And so they don't necessarily think about checking boxes all the time the way that my generation seems so stuck on, because they grew up with the internet. And believe me, I studied these generations for 2 years. Because they grew up with the internet, the sea of the world is very flat. And so it's no longer what they're taught at home or what they're taught in the classrooms. It's what they see. It's what they have access to when they go on the internet, and they can find out information for themselves. And transparency, authenticity is very, very important to them. So for them to think about kind of the borders, boxes, and boundaries of my generation is so antiquated. That's not the way they think. That's not the way they see people. That's not the way they think about orientation. That's not the way they think about race. That's not the way they think about gender. That's not the way they think about most institutions that we still kind of value. So, it's not just about thinking about today. It's what's going to happen tomorrow when those generations come into power and they can exercise their own consumer buying power. They can exercise their own right to vote. All those numbers are going to change drastically. And so I keep kind of saying, if the only thing you think about is what tomorrow's going to look like, look at that next generation and look at their behaviors, and you will know. And so those institutions that we tend to try to stick to about women this or that constituency that, no. They see people for people first, and that's the way they value. And so, I keep saying this to my kids. I mean, everything I've learned, I feel like I've learned from my kids. But, think like them. Get into their brain and start to think about what they value and how it's valued. And it's very, very different. So I am hopeful for the future. This isn't just a gender issue. It's a future leadership issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were talking about the younger generations. And my generation was a generation where being an entrepreneur was plan B, what you do between jobs, or if you don't find the job, actually. But the millennials, the Z Gen, are actually thinking of how they create wealth. And this is starting up, launching their businesses, or also investing. You always have been at the forefront of currency. Crypto is leading an unprecedented monetary revolution. How do you see the investment landscape when it comes to cryptocurrencies and digital assets?
Yeah, I actually led the Future of Money initiative when I was in Treasury, and at that time, way back when, there was this fear that some of the bigger technology companies were going to kind of take over how people bought items, how people, put their kind of money on the internet, etc. And there was a lot of fear about the future of coin and currency. There's a lot of fear about the future of regulation, how you manage this, how you follow this, and certainly, fear of kind of illicit financing, terrorism, and financing initiatives that might, kind of spur this underground world. And so, the way I think about crypto is probably more important about how I think about blockchain, right? So blockchain is the underlying technology that supports cryptocurrency. I think blockchain is here to stay, right? So whether, I'm not a big fan of kind of the floating assets of crypto, kind of let the market determine what that's going to be valued. I do support, digital assets that have a functional value. I do support digital assets that are backed. And so, when I think of even, blockchain in and of itself, whether it's fractional ownership of real estate or art or NFTs, tokenized items that can be sold, that is always going to continue no matter what. Now, that being said, there is, you probably have heard this, there is certainly conversations about what the administration is thinking about in terms of central bank digital currencies. It is likely that soon the administration is going to make an announcement. They're going to study this further, that all the impacted regulating stakeholders will come together and study kind of what the impact of what a central bank digital currency might look like and what their respective agencies' roles could be when it comes to crypto regulation. And look, I think that's healthy. I think, thank you, it should be studied. There should be some guardrails put in place. And these are kind of the balances that I think any administration has to go through that thinks about innovation and technology. But, I'm excited about what Unicorn Hunters is doing. I'm excited about this concept of Unicoin, which, if you want to talk about it, great. If you want me to talk about it, great. But I just think it's a great way to think about how to invest and how to diversify your investments by kind of leveraging Transparent Business, the parent company of Unicorn Hunters, leveraging their stake in the investments that they've taken in these companies that we feature on the show. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, one of the exciting things about this is that we will be able to build programs with startups. Many of them will be led by women, and invest in them, but also giving these women the opportunity to access the other resources that they need, the training in growth mentality. We always say that the main issues that we women have, it lies in our head. It's the imposter syndrome that you mentioned before, this inability to present ourselves with the confidence of what we can do, because we know that we are prepared to do it. So that for me, it's a very important thing, like giving them the resources, the visibility, the access to capital, but also giving people a simple opportunity to invest in a portfolio, in a diversified portfolio of companies with high growth potential. So we are betting a lot on this. We want to build this global ecosystem. As you know, we are going to Middle East now, to Saudi Arabia and Dubai, to present the concept. But we do believe that there is also a huge opportunity for the people out there to get into investing through Unicoin and our fund supporting a diverse portfolio of companies. Many people that perhaps in the past never have the chance to invest, because I don't know if you encounter, but many times I talk to my friends and they said, I would love to invest in startups, but I have no idea how I do it, because I don't have access to the startups. Like, startups are available for the angel investors, which means uncles and aunties of the startup, or the VCs, or the accelerators. But regular people that have disposable income will have to be accredited investors in the US, and investors from around the world will have the opportunity to co-invest with you, with me, with Woz, with Mo, with Alex, with Lance. Yes, Lance is coming back. And it's giving them the opportunity, as was said, like, invest perhaps in the next Apple from the ground up. This is something that before it never existed to regular folks. And on that regard, when women get into crypto, they do it at a slower pace than men. They do it yet more than in regular investment. And what do you think that we can do to get more women in Web3, in crypto and blockchain, in NFTs, in this new universe, and how we can use our power, our economic power, to empower other people? How can we drive this evolution to investment through perhaps like more simply?
Yeah, I think it's all about, risk tolerance, right? So it's all about really kind of how comfortable does one person feel to think about putting their investment in a particular area? And, no one can make that decision but yourself, right? So you really have to think about this as, there's definitely kind of different levels of investment. You have your long-term and your short investments. But certainly, when I think about kind of, again, I'll take it from my own personal point of view. If I want to invest in a startup, yes, that is, for a lot of it is risky. And so you do have to do your homework, right? So even for unicorn hunters, even if I'm going to invest in a company on unicorn hunters, I'm still going to go do my homework, right? It's not just what we say on the show. It's also me going online and taking a look at their private placement memorandum, doing some more kind of internet research, understanding the founders a little bit more. So even me being on unicorn hunters and me making my own investment, I still want to learn more about it. I still want to, that's just the way I think. And that is my level of risk appetite, is I still kind of, want to do as much research as possible. For some people, it's enough to, think about going into a mutual fund. For another person, it might be risking and, taking a risk on friends and family. And, that's why I talked about at the beginning, the whole VC world of entrepreneurship, that is a very closed system. And normally we civilians wouldn't really have access to that type of opportunity. So the fact that a show like Unicorn Hunters not just provides that opportunity to invest in the companies who make it on the show, but there will be other opportunities, as you say, to think about kind of, this robust pipeline of other entrepreneurs who, may not make it on the show, but maybe they have other types of opportunities that might be available. And again, this is where I think Unicoin is going to be really interesting, because it hedges its own position in terms of Unicorn Hunters' stake into these companies. But then it also, provides a way to kind of really, think about, again, for a person who maybe was on the fence about investing in what's a traditional crypto option, this is, again, just another option that could be available to you that otherwise wouldn't have existed. I mean, Unicorn Hunters came about because of this vision, right? This vision that you all had about how to kind of this intersection between investments and entertainment. Such a great concept. And the fact that you were able to bring together, whether it's, Mo and I from the government perspective, obviously you from She Works and all the work that you've been doing. Everywhere I go, people mention your name. People, that I meet, that they say, "Oh yeah, Silvina, isn't she great?" And it's amazing. Again, you've been in the space for a long time, and of course, Alex with his own track record of building businesses, etc. But the fact that you're able to also bring in people like Lance, whom I just adore because he's a real person, and he has his own fund, as you know, with Aaron Rodgers and others, and his own investments that he has, his own personal investments. But to also have someone like Steve Wozniak, who is, just the salt of the earth. Of course, he's smart. That's a given. But to understand the people behind the people you thought you knew, in the news or the stories that you tell, to really understand what motivates these people. The fact that we all keep coming back to this show when we don't have to is a testament. It really is. I mean, to have the founder of one of the most successful companies, technology companies ever created, and the fact that he wants to come back, the fact that he considers us his friends and Alex his friend, etc., and the fact that he believes in what we're doing all together, and the fact that we have this amazing rapport, not just on camera but off camera, that says a lot. We're repeat customers, if you will, right? We don't have to be, but we're coming back because we believe in this mission. We believe in what you're all trying to build and what we are all trying to build together, and to open those doors. And I say break down those walls, not the ceiling, the walls itself, says a lot about the spirit of this movement. It is a movement because it's so groundbreaking. It's so different from anything that's out there, period. And the fact that that we all can do this on a streaming platform, which means it now has a global presence, right? We're not being just kind of boxed into our own little kind of TV world. This is a global platform, right? And to see where it's growing to, over 15 million viewers and thousands and thousands and thousands of investors, it's exciting because this is almost like a pilot, right? This is almost a social experiment. But I think it's working beyond what any of us, maybe Alex saw it coming, I don't know, but I think it's working beyond, I think, what any of us anticipated in terms of the positive reception that I get constantly for what it means, not just seeing the type of questions and the types of companies who've made it on the show, but also how it makes you think. When we all ask the questions that we ask, and people should know it's unscripted, right? No one's telling us what to say. We hear these presentations, we ask these questions, and we go in there with this kind of, responsibility about what we would do as investors, if we would invest. And then, of course, we leave it up to the audience members to also, again, do their own homework, do their own research, et cetera. And if they want to kind of, think about their own risk tolerance, fabulous. But I think because people are much more visual today, and even before the pandemic, even before we now have this world of Zoom, but even before the pandemic, as I was talking about millennials and post-millennials, their world is very visual. It's what they see, it's what they can look up.
Right.
And so to be able to see all of us interact the way we interact and ask the questions that we do is very, very meaningful. And the fact that it's taken off the way it has, we're coming back again. It's exciting to see where this
I'm extremely humbled by that, Rosie. I'm extremely grateful because, as you said, this was just the first part of the first season of a show, and we have an unprecedented success in a new platform that brings together the show, but also the interactivity to allow people to co-invest along the circle of money along us. And as was said, presenting people with the opportunity to invest, perhaps in the next Apple from the garage, from the ground up. And one thing that it's also important is that everything is real. We all invest for different reasons. We all have different motivations. Some people invest because they like the founder. Some others invest because the numbers add up. Some others invest because they love the purpose. So we represent each one of the different people in the audience, and this is really beautiful because we are opening up as well a wall of opportunities for the entrepreneurs that are being watched by millions of people from around the world. Many of them tell us that they are getting contracts, they are getting partners, and this is just starting up. And as you know, we'll be announcing very soon distribution deals in Latin America, starting there, but taking it to other markets with leading media, and it's just starting up. And Jessica Olivan is asking us, how we need to invest more to secure the future of the patrimony for our children. How can she invest in female entrepreneurs? Where do I start? And the question for you, Rosie, will be, when you look at an entrepreneur and a women entrepreneur, what are you looking at?
Yeah, look, I mean, when we had in one of the first series of shows that we had, the one that I remember the most happens to be the female founder that we had, Lauren Fundos. I'm sure you remember her too. I mean, she was just amazing, right? Amazing. And would I have ever run across her if a show like Unicorn Hunters didn't exist? I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would have, but she was just such a dynamo, right? And she came from Microsoft's kind of incubator program, which was amazing. And so, you guys had those relationships, you brought her in, and it's great. When I first saw, after we taped and I first saw when the show came out, and I said to my kids, I said, when you make a pitch, do what she did, watch what she did, watch her presentation. And that's exactly how I want you to do it. I mean, and it's not because she was a woman. She happened to be the person in that first series that I thought just did her pitch the best. So that's what people have to remember. You're not just investing in the company, you're investing in the person, you're investing in the founder, right? And there are a lot of people who think about that first and foremost. You gotta trust the founder and CEO, you got to really believe in what they're doing, and hopefully they'll run the company the way it's supposed to be run. But to find those gems, the buried treasure of female founders is difficult. It is. It's very, very difficult. Again, you're now starting to see a lot of these funds that are solely investing in women. I happen to also be on the board of a great organization called Ladies Who Launch. That's literally the name, founded by Sarah Fryer, who's a former CFO of Square, who's now the CEO of Nextdoor, something I love. So to see someone like her take her personal time and effort and money and put into a program like Ladies Who Launch, I mean, it's just a whole array of entrepreneurs starting out at the very, very beginnings of their companies, and to see something like that grow the way it has is great. So unfortunately, you really do have to dig around a little bit more to find more of those opportunities specifically for women, but they are out there. They are definitely out there, and I think you're going to see a lot more of them in the next year or two.
Yes, and we need to find our voice and make it heard. I remember Lauren; she was unapologetically successful and confident, and she was picture perfect. It was quite a wow, because it's not so common that you see women pitching with so much confidence, and I instantly felt that I wanted to give her my money. Plus, she's into sports, so I really like that. But I can be a client, and I like her, and I see that business can pivot because the market can change. So some people, when they invest, they get perhaps like too attached to the idea in which they invested, and then they see that it changed, and then they resent that. I always tell them, like, when you invest in the concept of a business, but invest more on the entrepreneurs, because they will do what is right for you as a shareholder. And if they have to pivot, so let it be. Just get it done. It's just, at the end of the day, the ability to adjust to the markets, to the opportunities, and to be ready to jump on the opportunities, what makes entrepreneurs successful. And we have Carla, who is asking us why men make decisions in places where we don't have a seat, and how can we hack our way to be part of the conversation. What was, in your experience, in the public sector, in the private sector as well, the key gem that you learn to have your voice loud, to express yourself confidently, and to reach to the level in which you reach in an environment where women are an exception, not the rule?
Yeah, so I'm probably one of those over preparers. So even before I accept a position, I am very deliberate and very thoughtful about the position that I want and who I'm going to work with and who I'm going to work for. And so when you do your due diligence about a job, sometimes you don't. When you take a job, sometimes things change. You have a different boss, etc. But going into that job, in my opinion, is going to be one of the biggest decisions you're going to make. And even before I accept a position, I'm going to set the terms in terms of what my responsibilities are going to be and the understanding about how it's going to work. So I've been, it's not just luck. The jobs that I've taken, I've had amazing bosses, amazing supervisors, but I knew that going in. And even when perhaps those leadership changes happen, you still have to navigate an organization to be able to find your champions. And I know a lot of people call them mentors, but for me, a champion is someone that I can go to as a sounding board, and who will be authentic and honest with me to give me the feedback that I need when I'm making a presentation, when I'm making a request, when I'm making a recommendation. That person is going to be the person that's going to help me kind of overcome the no's, anticipate the no's, and get to the yeses. So, that could be a peer, it could be your boss, it could be a number of people, but finding those champions and really being open, bringing yourself to be open to that type of feedback is part of, I think, the growth that we all need in our workforce. To have that ability to make mistakes, to have the ability to take strategic risks, to have the ability to be able to find those relationships that are going to be important to you to further on, to further your success, is tough. And I got to say, even in my personal efforts with Empowerment 2026, most of my champions have been men with daughters. And perhaps a lot of people don't like when I say that, but here's the truth. If women are in, 20 something percent of the decision making capacities, then men are in the 80 something, 80% or so of the decision making capacities. And so change only happens when we don't settle. But change also only happens when the decision makers have to come to the table. And so, again, I don't come from this as a women's issue. I come from this as a future leadership issue. So, men are part of the equation. They're not the enemy. They are part of the solution. And we have to go into those, whether it is the workforce, whether it is, again, in my case, my personal efforts with Empowerment 2026 and all the projects I'm working on, you have to go in with an open mind, making sure you're doing your homework and making sure that you're open. You're open to feedback. You're open to kind of, again, doing the work that's needed in order to take that next step. But it is not easy. Let me tell you, I mean, it's been, I guess 14 years since I started in the administration, but I'm about 30 years older. And it's because, the work that I wanted to accomplish, and I did. But you do pay a price. It's not easy. And the stress that comes with it, juggling everything you're trying to juggle at the same time and still trying to make history along the way. It is not easy. But I got to tell you, I'm 56 years old right now, and I wouldn't change a thing, not a thing.
I love that you say that. And also, Rosie, I love the fact that you make a distinction between mentors and champions or sponsors, the people that will pick you up, will extend their helping hand, and remind me of the big brother, big sister. And also another important thing that I take as a takeaway from what you just outlined is the importance of working together with men. I encourage every women entrepreneur to have also a male co-founder, as well as to encourage men to have women co-founded, because together we are stronger. Together we work better. We bring diversity to the table and we can create better products. And we have a last question from Alicia Williams. She want to know what is the smartest investment a woman can make in 2022. So let's think of this as closing remarks to celebrate Women International Day.
That is such a great question. I would say, it's the same answer that I would give in 2022 or 2032. The best investment a woman can make is investing in yourself. So, too often we put other people first. It just happens that way. And the way I think about it, especially, again, the pandemic has caused a lot of people to rethink their priorities, rethink their values. I love when people talk about doing like a personal business plan. Like, think of yourself as a product, right? And so, know your market, etc., kind of know your competition, but really knowing what's important to you, right? And so when people say, for example, I love when people say, how do you have it all? How do you do? There is no such thing as having it all. It doesn't exist, right? So before I moved to DC, I call it kind of the rosy pie of life. The rosy pie of life had lots of slices and fabulous flavors. And before I took the job in DC, I had my girlfriends, I had my sisters, I was working out, I had my kids, my job, blah, blah, blah. When I moved to DC and I realized my work and my life was going to be different, I had two slices in my pie. And that was my work and that was my kids. And nothing else existed. So maybe my house wasn't always as clean as I would have wanted it to be. Maybe I would have wanted to work out more, et cetera, et cetera. But those were my two slices that I chose for those moments in time. And that was my choice. No one else's choice but mine. And I think people need to remember that we make those choices that we think we have to make for other people. But if this is your show, this is your life. And if you are managing all these responsibilities, you need to be able to make sure that you put you first in terms of what you value and what you prioritize and how you're going to tackle it to the best of your ability. There is no knight in shining armor. You are your knight in shining armor. And the sooner you realize and what you can do to take control of that and what you can do to invest in yourself to be able to take those steps, it is so liberating to have that mindset.
I love that. I really love that, and I think that it's just like on the plane. You put your oxygen mask first, and then you take
I
care
love
of the
that.
rest.
There you go. There it is. I
I,
love it.
is very, very important. And we're wrapping up, Rosie. I just want to thank you enormously for the pleasure and the opportunity to see you. I know it's very late in Paris, so double thank you for sharing this special day. It's very, very important and special for me that you are here, that you are part of what we are building together to bring democracy into access to opportunities and access to capital for entrepreneurs through unicorn hunters and through unicorns. And I look forward to meeting you, to seeing you in Riyadh and much more. And for the audience that is following up, I want to especially invite you to see the episodes at unicornhunters.com to learn about the companies that we are supporting. And why not interactively invest in them, learn a little bit more about them before making a decision, make education decisions, and of course, if they want to support many of them at all, also considering supporting Unicorn. You will be supporting investment fund attached to it and will pay dividends, and we will be supporting entrepreneurs with our crypto and hopefully many, many more women entrepreneurs. So thank you very much, Rosie, and see you very, very soon.
Thank you, Silvina. Talk to you soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.